Have you ever been laughed at while your life was falling apart? Not just ignored, but mocked. Not just forgotten, but whispered about. Like your failure was entertainment. Like your silence was weakness. They didn't ask where you went. They didn't care. Because in their eyes, you were finished. A man with no money, no power, no voice. But what they didn't know is that in the silence, you weren't breaking. You were becoming. You see, Stoics don't fight for attention. They disappear, not to escape, but to evolve. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." Nahum, so the wise man doesn't scream, he doesn't explain. He lets the fire rebuild him in private, until he no longer needs to be understood. In this video, you'll discover why disappearing is not weakness, it's warfare. Why silence isn't retreat, it's transformation. And why the most dangerous man is the one who rises when no one is watching. Like the video if you've ever been through the dark without applause. Subscribe if you're done proving and ready to build.
Number 1.
Radical responsibility. Imagine waking up in a room that still smells of yesterday's failures. Your phone is silent, your inbox empty, and the people who once called you brother now schedule their laughter around your absence. In that instant, most men reach for excuses the way drowning men grasp for driftwood. Yet the Stoic within you remembers Marcus Aurelius rising before dawn, reminding himself that the universe owes him nothing except the chance to govern his own mind. And surprisingly, with each passing second, the weight of ownership begins to feel lighter than the burden of excuse. First of all, radical responsibility is not a trendy slogan. It is the flame that burns away every narrative you have used to hide your strength. You see, the moment you whisper, "This is my fault," you stop negotiating with weakness and start negotiating with destiny. Moreover, that single sentence flips the entire script of your life. Rowling, long before the world bowed to her wizarding empire, sat in a cafe with a stroller, rejected by publishers, living on welfare. Nevertheless, she opened a blank notebook every morning, pouring out a story only she could see, because ownership refuses to wait for permission. She refused to outsource responsibility for her dream, and that quiet refusal changed literary history. Because of this principle, Stoicism never promises comfort, it promises clarity. Epictetus lost his freedom to slavery, yet chose to see every chain as training for the mind. Consequently, his discourses gleam like a lighthouse for anyone steering through humiliation without capsizing. Undoubtedly, today's man may feel less like a slave and more like a ghost in his own timeline, scrolling, complaining, waiting. But the cure is identical. As long as you own your reactions, life cannot own you. Next, let us confront the seductive lie that circumstances create character. They do not. Character is the sculpture you carve each dawn from whatever stone the world dumps at your door. For instance, consider Robert Downey Jr. Addiction dragged him from red carpets to courtrooms. Even though Hollywood laughed, he treated every rehab check-in as a forge, not a cage. He began new rituals, rising early, practicing Wing Chun, logging gratitude. As a result, he rebuilt a career most believed dead. Furthermore, responsibility without ritual is just guilt wearing a different mask. Therefore, choose habits that sting in the short term, but heal in the long. Wake before the city stirs. Write 3 lines of unfiltered truth. Lift iron until it trembles. Read 1 page that puts your ego on trial. Then importantly, guard those rituals as if they were oxygen, because they are. Meanwhile, the world will test your resolve by handing you fresh excuses. The economy, your upbringing, the algorithm, the weather. However, the Stoic mind answers each excuse with silent action. When Seneca tutored Nero, he wrote letters reminding himself that the greatest prison is believing someone else is responsible for your life. Likewise, your quiet deeds, small deposits in the vault of discipline, earn compound interest time cannot erode. In contrast, blame feels warm at first. It gathers sympathy the way a fire gathers moths. Yet blame is a candle, comforting now, useless against the coming storm. Indeed, true power is choosing to stand outside that circle of warmth, shivering with potential, forging armor from the cold. Think of Steve Jobs returning to Apple. He did not spend a decade blaming the board. He spent it refining his vision until the world could not ignore it. All things considered, radical responsibility is the first gate you must walk through if you ever hope to disappear and rebuild. It is not glamorous. It is gritty, lonely, thankless. But know this, the mirror may accuse you today, yet tomorrow it can applaud. The applause begins the moment you admit every scar, every debt, every lost year is yours to transform. Namely, you become the sculptor, not the statue. To wrap things up, ask yourself before you sleep tonight, what excuse am I still renting space to in my head? Write it, rip it, then rise before sunrise. Because, as James the Stoic would say, the world does not respect the man who dodges blame. It respects the man who absorbs it, refines it, and strides into the arena stronger than the rumor of his defeat.
Number 2.
Discipline in the dark. Imagine the hour before dawn when the city is still intoxicated with sleep. That is the hour most men dismiss as pointless, yet it is the forge where unbreakable character is hammered into shape. Marcus Aurelius called it meeting the day, a challenge he whispered to himself on frozen mornings. First of all, that pre-dawn silence is not empty. It is crowded with opportunities no one else is awake to claim. You see, the Stoics practiced what modern science now celebrates, voluntary discomfort. Epictetus urged his students to start with small hardships, cold water, plain food, a hard bench, to teach the mind to obey the will, not the mood. Likewise, Kobe Bryant rang a janitor at 4 a.m. as shooting 500 jumpers before sunrise while peers still dreamed. Because of this hidden discipline, he became a constellation in a sky of temporary stars. Next, consider Maya Angelou. Each day she rented a bare motel room and refused to leave until the work was done. No music, no phone, no applause. She understood, as Seneca noted, that it is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. In that rented silence, she struck the gold that still heals strangers she never met. Moreover, discipline demands a ruthless audit of distractions. Algorithms promise dopamine but steal ours. Thus, become a minimalist of attention. Delete, mute, unsubscribe. Not to be trendy, but to guard the cathedral of focus inside your skull. When Stoics retreated inward, they weren't escaping reality. They were rehearsing how to meet it on their terms. Because of this vigilance, progress accrues invisibly. Picture water dripping on stone. Nothing seems to happen, yet months later a groove appears. Likewise, your early workouts, daily journal, and refusal to scroll look trivial until all of a sudden people call you lucky. Luck is the public face of private discipline. Indeed, discipline is the compound interest of effort. Each small deposit may seem meaningless, yet the ledger never lies. Day by day, repetition engraves confidence so deep that setbacks bounce instead of bruise. Therefore, when adversity arrives, and it will, you already possess a reservoir of proof that you can endure. That quiet certainty is priceless, and it's purchased only with early alarms and unseen sweat. However, discipline without direction mutates into obsession. Therefore, choose a North Star written in present tense. I keep the promises I make to myself. That sentence guides every micro-decision. When fatigue bargains for comfort, the North Star dissolves the debate. In fact, disciplined solitude amplifies creativity. Nikola Tesla walked city blocks at dusk, building machines in his imagination before touching copper. Consequently, when he entered the lab, success seemed instant. It wasn't instant, it was invisible preparation revealed. Likewise, your project, whether a book, a business, or the rebuilding of your body, ripens in unseen hours until it appears miraculous to casual observers. Furthermore, public validation too early suffocates growth. A seed pulled from soil to check progress dies in daylight. Let results speak what your ego wants to shout. James the Stoic reminds us, a premature victory lap is just a shorter walk back to mediocrity. Guard momentum with secrecy. Meanwhile, remember, discipline includes rest. Marcus scheduled mindful walks among pines because reflection is the twin of exertion. Plan quiet evenings without screens. Let boredom sharpen your inner dialogue. To the disciplined, boredom is a blank page begging for new strategy. Choose it. It trains you to entertain ideas instead of impulses. Finally, track the streak. Not for applause, but to show the doubting parts of your mind that you follow through. Each crossed-off day is another brick in the unseen fortress protecting your purpose. Very soon after, you will notice conversations change. People ask why your gaze feels heavier, why your words land deeper. They are meeting the compound interest of discipline. All things considered, discipline in the dark is the covenant you sign when no witnesses are present. Break it, and nothing else you build will stand. Keep it, and even failure becomes fuel. Tomorrow before dawn, when excuses line up like eager salesmen, remember this. Your future respect sleeps one snooze button away. Rise, open the door, and step into the cold. Destiny waits, but it will not wait forever.
Number 3.
Choosing solitude over noise. There comes a moment in every man's life when he must ask a brutal question. Who am I when no one's watching? Not who I pretend to be, not who I perform to be, but who I truly am. When the noise fades, the crowd disappears, and there's no applause left to chase. For the Stoics, this wasn't a hypothetical exercise. It was a necessary confrontation. Because without silence, there is no self. And without solitude, there is no strength. To begin with, solitude is not isolation. It's not loneliness. It's a decision to turn inward, to meet the parts of yourself that distraction keeps hidden. Marcus Aurelius often withdrew into himself amid the chaos of Roman rule, writing meditations not for fame, but for clarity. That wasn't weakness. That was power, strategic withdrawal. His way of remembering who he was when the world tried to rewrite him. Moreover, the man who chooses solitude over noise isn't running away from life. He's preparing to meet it without illusion. Today, everyone's performing, everyone's curating, posting, reacting. But the Stoic doesn't perform for the algorithm. He sharpens in secret. And because of this, his presence lands heavier. Not because he's louder, but because he's more aligned. You don't need to shout when your silence carries weight. Take, for instance, Bill Gates. Twice a year, he disappears into his think weeks. 7 days alone in a cabin with nothing but books, his notes, and his thoughts. No headlines, no distractions. And out of that solitude have come ideas that shaped global industries. Why? Because silence isn't a void, it's a crucible. The Stoic understands this deeply. You don't find wisdom in the feed. You find it in stillness. The mind, like steel, only sharpens when it meets resistance. And that resistance lives within. In addition to that, solitude reveals what truly drives you. When no one's watching, your real priorities emerge. What you reach for, what you delay, what you crave when there's no one left to impress. That's the unfiltered truth. Seneca said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Solitude teaches you how much of your fear is fiction, how much of your suffering is just noise in disguise, yet solitude is rarely comfortable. In fact, it's often where your insecurities scream the loudest. But that's exactly why it's necessary. To grow past the ego, you must face it. Not with judgment, but with presence. The man who can sit in a room alone, undistracted and undisturbed, is a man who has reclaimed his power. The ability to sit with your flaws, your failures, your fears, without flinching, is what makes you unshakable. Meanwhile, the world will keep begging for your attention. Notifications, headlines, gossip, chaos. All of it designed to keep your mind noisy and your soul shallow. Because the moment you're distracted, you're manageable. But the Stoic knows better. He sees every wasted minute as stolen momentum. And so he retreats. Not to run, but to refine. Not to disappear, but to return stronger. Solitude isn't rejection of life. It is preparation for it. Furthermore, this isn't something you do once. It's a rhythm, a cycle of withdrawal and return. Like the tide pulling back not to vanish, but to come back with force. People may not understand. They may call you distant, cold, antisocial. Let them. The Stoic does not chase understanding. He chases alignment, and alignment often requires silence. Importantly, solitude also reveals how much you've been performing for love you never needed. It strips away the need for validation. You begin to see clearly that the man who truly knows himself no longer seeks applause. Because when the mirror claps, the world's opinion becomes irrelevant. Ultimately, choosing solitude over noise is about becoming whole again. It's about removing the mask, facing the mirror, and seeing what's really there. Not what you hoped would be, but what is. That's where true power is born. Because it's the only place where ego dies and clarity is reborn. So the next time you feel ignored or misunderstood, don't chase attention. Chase stillness. Don't explain yourself. Just sit. Don't post. Just build. Because when you re-emerge from solitude, you won't need to tell anyone who you've become. You won't need to defend it or prove it. Your silence will speak louder than your past ever could.
Number 4.
Purpose over revenge. There's a dangerous moment that comes right after your transformation begins. The moment people start to notice. The ones who mocked you now look confused. The ones who doubted you want answers. They whispered, "What happened to him?" But here's where the Stoic separates from the emotional. This is where purpose overtakes pride. You see, most men would be tempted to strike back, to throw their success in the faces of those who abandoned them, to remind everyone who laughed exactly how wrong they were. But the Stoic does something different. He stays silent. He keeps moving forward, because revenge is loud and purpose is quiet. Marcus Aurelius warned against wasting time on those who wrong us. The best revenge, he said, is to be unlike him who caused the harm. In other words, don't become what broke you. Don't mirror the pettiness. Don't inherit the sickness you suffered from. Rise above it, not for their sake, but for yours. Let's take a real example, Oprah Winfrey. As a young woman, she was told she didn't have the right look for television, fired from her first news job, laughed at for being emotional on camera, and yet she didn't return with bitterness. She built her own stage. She didn't seek revenge. She created purpose. And in doing so, her success wasn't just redemption, it was evolution. Likewise, the man who heals doesn't do so to prove anything. He does it because the work matters more than the applause. Because the pain taught him something louder than the praise ever could. There is deep power in doing the right thing, even when no one acknowledges it. Seneca once said, "The reward of a good deed is having done it." That's it. Not approval, not recognition. Just alignment with your highest values. Furthermore, when you live for revenge, your enemies still own you. They occupy your thoughts. They influence your decisions. You're reacting instead of leading. But when you shift toward purpose, your compass changes. You begin to make choices based on who you're becoming, not who you're trying to be. This is why Stoicism isn't passive, it's focused. It's the discipline of not letting the past dictate the present. Meanwhile, those who once disrespected you will grow uncomfortable in your presence. Not because you say anything, but because your energy exposes their smallness. And still, you say nothing. That's silence. It's not emptiness. It's mastery. It's the result of all the mornings you woke up in pain, but trained anyway. All the nights you were alone but didn't fold. All the progress they didn't see. That's your real victory. Let's consider another example. Nelson Mandela. After decades in prison, he didn't emerge with bitterness. He didn't demand apologies. He chose reconciliation over retaliation. And because of that choice, he didn't just free himself. He helped free a nation. That is what it looks like to choose purpose over revenge. That is what Stoic strength feels like in action. Not only that, but when you stop trying to prove, you finally start to live. You stop responding to noise and begin building something eternal. You stop being reactive and start becoming grounded. Because here's the truth no one tells you. Revenge fades fast, but purpose compounds, day by day, step by step. And before long, you've outgrown the need to be acknowledged entirely. Importantly, Living with purpose doesn't mean you forget what happened. It means you refuse to be defined by it. The betrayal, the rejection, the mockery, they become fuel, not identity. You don't suppress the pain, you redirect it. And in that redirection, you create meaning out of what was meant to break you. So the next time you're tempted to go back and prove yourself, ask instead, is this movement pulling me forward or dragging me down? Is this response aligned with my future or rooted in my past? Because the man who always looks backward never sees what's ahead. Ultimately, the Stoic path isn't about proving anyone wrong. It's about becoming someone, right? Someone whole, someone whose peace is no longer negotiable. The true victory isn't walking back into the room louder. It's walking past the room entirely, because you've built something too real to explain and too sacred to waste on small minds.
Number 5.
Transformation without announcement. Every genuine metamorphosis begins in a hush. A seed never shouts about splitting its shell, yet a forest starts that way. Likewise, when a man decides to rebuild, his first step is not a declaration, it is a disappearance. The Stoics understood this intuitively. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that figs ripen in silence. They do not beckon applause as they sweeten. Transformation is a whisper, not a broadcast. First of all, the impulse to show progress too early is natural, but it is also dangerous. A half-formed idea exposed to criticism withers before it can bear fruit. Because of this, the Stoic cultivates a private greenhouse for his growth. He protects the fragile roots of new habits from the trampling feet of public opinion. As Epictetus wrote, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish. Improvement, in other words, thrives in concealment. Moreover, consider Keanu Reeves. After a string of personal tragedies and career setbacks, he slipped out of the limelight. There were no dramatic press releases, no revenge interviews, just a man disappearing into stunt training, motorcycle rides, and quiet philanthropy. Years later, he re-emerged as John Wick, an icon of relentless focus. Audiences called it a comeback. From a Stoic lens, it was proof that the quiet rebuild is often the most explosive. In addition to that, notice how the world reacted. They tried to trace the timeline, to label the process, to assign a narrative. Yet the truth remained personal and inaccessible. Keanu's silence was his boundary, and boundaries, like strong walls, allow construction to continue undisturbed. What's more, every brick he laid in private stored potential energy that detonated as undeniable presence once the curtain lifted. Yet transformation without announcement is not secrecy for secrecy's sake. It is strategy. It prevents external praise from fossilizing you in early versions of yourself. Undoubtedly, praise feels good, but praise can freeze growth by convincing you that good enough is good enough. Therefore, the Stoic refuses the dopamine drip of premature validation. He embraces a longer arc, where the scoreboard is internal and the referee is his own conscience. Next, think of Adele vanishing after her album 21. She skipped award shows, posted no studio selfies, offered no sneak peeks. Many assumed she was fading. In reality, she was healing her voice, raising her son, and distilling pain into melodies that would later break every record. Her silent years became the seasoning that made 25 resonate worldwide. Thus, absence amplified the return. Furthermore, silent work compounds because it eliminates friction. When no one knows what you are building, no one can distract you with unsolicited blueprints. You iterate faster, pivot sooner, and fail privately. Consequently, failure becomes feedback instead of humiliation, and progress accelerates. As Seneca insisted, a wise man is content with his own approval. External silence magnifies internal dialogue, and that dialogue is the forge of mastery. Meanwhile, the digital landscape begs for constant updates. Screens blink, algorithms tempt, and trends pressure you to broadcast every micro-victory. To everyone's surprise, history honors those who resisted that pressure. Leonardo da Vinci vanished into experimentation, producing notebooks the world still studies. Likewise, your legacy will hinge on depth, not visibility. Because of this, practice the art of stealth iteration. Draft without posting. Train without tagging. Study without streaming. Let curiosity replace vanity. With each passing second, your competence will outgrow your need for confirmation. Then when results finally surface, they will feel inevitable rather than sudden. You become an overnight success 20 years in the making, and that paradox is the hallmark of real work. Importantly, silent transformation also shields you from comparison. When progress is hidden, there is no public scoreboard to invite envy. Your only rival remains yesterday's version of yourself, and that is a contest you can actually win. The Stoic embraces this private duel, knowing that public races often end in public burnout. To wrap things up, remember, you are not obligated to post updates on your resurrection. Disappear, develop, deliver petontorius tibian to saken or near turn. Let skeptics speculate and doubters downgrade your potential. The moment you emerge, the conversation will rewrite itself. And you, having mastered the discipline of quiet progress, will be too focused on the next horizon to pause for victory laps. Transformation is not a headline. It is a horizon that keeps moving. Chase it in silence, and one day the roar of your results will eclipse every rumor ever whispered about your downfall. Number 6, becoming the man you respect. There comes a point in every man's journey when the goal is no longer to impress others. It's to stop disappointing yourself. Not because you hate who you've been, but because you finally see who you could be. And that shift, from seeking validation to building internal respect, is the moment everything begins to change. The Stoics taught that your character is your destiny, and nothing shapes character more than the standards you hold when no one is watching. To begin with, the Stoic man doesn't chase applause. He chases alignment. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, just that you do the right thing. The rest doesn't matter. Not praise, not attention, just right action. When your reflection starts to matter more than their opinion, you stop performing and start becoming. Moreover, becoming the man you respect means closing the gap between what you say and what you do. Integrity is not a performance. It's a practice for one, and it's not built in public. It's forged in private, early mornings, late nights, small decisions that look meaningless to everyone but you. Consider Mr. Rogers. Yes, the children's television host. Off camera, he was exactly the same. Gentle, measured, kind. Why? Because he didn't create a persona. He practiced a philosophy. He became what he respected. In addition to that, becoming the man you respect often means letting go of the versions of you that other people still expect. The old roles, the old labels, the old storylines. You stop living to maintain consistency with your past and start living to honor your future. Epictetus said, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. In other words, identity isn't something you wait for. It's something you build, action by action, moment by moment. However, this kind of becoming requires solitude, friction, and brutal honesty. You have to ask questions that make you uncomfortable. Am I keeping promises to myself? Am I reacting or responding? Am I living with urgency or making excuses in the name of patience? These aren't soft questions. They are chisels. And if you sit with them long enough, they start carving something noble. Meanwhile, most people will never understand this shift. They'll see you withdrawing and think you've changed. They're right. But it's not because you're cold. It's because you're clearing space. The old friendships, the shallow conversations, the fake obligations, they no longer align with your new standard. And as you raise that standard, something strange happens. The noise fades, but your soul gets louder. Let's take a real example. David Goggins. Known for his relentless mindset, he didn't build that discipline for views. He built it to survive himself. To look in the mirror and respect the man staring back. And that's why people feel his presence. Not because he's perfect, but because he's precise. He no longer negotiates with his weakness. He calls it out every day. Furthermore, the man you respect isn't a fantasy. He's already inside you. He's just buried under habits you've outgrown, beliefs that no longer serve you, and stories you've inherited but never questioned. And the Stoic path is about unearthing that man, not all at once, but one courageous decision at a time. Importantly, this has nothing to do with becoming invincible. It has everything to do with becoming consistent, showing up even when you're tired, speaking truth even when it trembles, choosing discipline even when no one will see it. That's what builds self-respect. That's what earns quiet confidence. All things considered, becoming the man you respect is not a single act. It's 1,000 invisible choices. It's deleting the app that wastes your mornings. It's calling your mother back. It's telling the truth even when it costs you comfort. It's walking away when staying would be easier. It's every time you decide that who you are matters more than how you're seen. To wrap things up, know this. When you finally become the man you respect, applause becomes irrelevant. You'll walk different, not with arrogance, but with assurance, because you'll carry a kind of peace that can't be faked, borrowed, or stolen. And that peace comes from knowing you built yourself in the dark and you did it without an audience. Some men disappear to run, others disappear to rebuild. If you're the latter, if you're choosing silence, not out of fear, but out of focus, then this message was meant for you. The Stoics never taught us to announce our growth. They taught us to live it, quietly, consistently, unshakably. You don't owe them updates. You don't owe them proof. What you owe is to yourself, to become the kind of man who can stand alone, speak less, and mean more. A man who's done hiding, done performing, and done explaining what he's building. Because when the work is real, the results speak. And when the soul is strong, it no longer needs applause to breathe. So go, disappear, rebuild. And when you return, don't look back. The version of you that needed their validation is gone. What remains is something solid, something sacred, something no one can take. If this spoke to you, share it with a man who's ready to rise in silence. And remember, you don't have to scream to be powerful. You just have to become someone who doesn't flinch when it's quiet.